Stepping out onto the lush red carpet, we moved through a scanner, the guard nodding at us as it didn't pick up any weapons. It was wrong. I had one hanging on my arm, and it was only tuned for smart weapons, a damned oversight in my opinion. Reva sashayed into the crowd. I stole a moment to enjoy her rear aspect, then tried to not make it look like it was obvious she was towing me along. Music played softly, the scent of 100 perfumes hung in the air. Now, who was looking nervous at the hunter in their midst? Who was looking overly nonchalant? Eyes turned to regard us, some turned to look down on us, some did look nervous. Most were curious. Reva was one of the few greenskins at this event. She stood out in the crowd, so did I, by association. I noticed there was the odd sneer from those who saw orcs as lower society. Half-breeds of any race, to some, were worse. Either way you sliced it, we weren't going to be able to keep ourselves from being noticed here. We were also in the minority of guests whose augmentations were more practical. Chrome limbs, gold-plated paneling, neon-lit eyes, holographic body art. Even in this suit, I still felt underdressed. It was a wide floor space we were on, with raised stages in wide-spread areas that stepped up while running along the length of the room. At the other end, an actual stage, the centre of which was vacant at the moment, but the band played off to one side. If this was all part of Sierra's apartments, I was marvelled at what she must use them for on a regular Tuesday night. Talk about entertaining space. High over our heads, a wide glass ceiling gave the impression of being open to the sky. There were no stars, but the cloud bank was illuminated by all the colours the city had to throw at it. On one table far and away, I could see Chief Inspector Hammond, another green skin in this crowd of humans and elves, standing out like a sore thumb. He seemed to be alone, not socializing. I couldn't help but feel bad for him. Because of his race, and on top of that, he was a cop. He was probably almost as popular as me in this space. He hadn't yet seen us though. I guessed he would pretend not to even if he had, given our rivalry. There was a few more races represented, the odd gnome, a kitsune or two, and I could swear I could make out a djinn, or at least half djinn. No goblins, unsurprisingly, and only a couple of orcs, also most likely half-breeds. The elite of the world had historically been elves and humans. Good to see that hadn't changed in the last couple of thousand years. I scanned the faces looking for anyone familiar, other than Hammond. "Anyone we know?" Reva asked softly. I paused in my reply as I saw a very familiar face. Yep. You couldn't miss her. She was the definition of glamour tonight, the woman of the hour, Sierra Ptolemine, and she was heading straight towards us. She'd seen me. Great, no turning back now. As Sierra approached us through the crowd of elite and powerful, I wished I'd had more to drink before we'd come. Reva was looking in the opposite direction to me, as I saw the crowd part to admit our hostess. My hand was resting on her waist, and I gave her a light nudge to turn her around so we were both facing the elven matriarch as she approached. She swayed as she walked, perfectly elegant, nubile, not at all looking the several hundred years old that she was. She must have spent that time practicing making an entrance, my cynical mind thought. Though you couldn't deny, she was clearly the lady of the hour. She was smiling that same smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, noticing everyone, greeting them by name, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. Hell, if there was a baby nearby, I would have put money on it that she'd try and kiss it. "Ulf, darling!" She reached us, spreading her arms wide, one holding a flute of champagne, the other one empty for shaking hands. Her manner was that of a lush socialite, not the straightforward, reserved businesswoman of a couple of days ago. She changed faces more often than I changed my shirt. "And who is this stunning Amazonian goddess?" She gestured to Reva with her free hand. "You must be the boxing legend, the Slayer herself. This is an honor. I saw your last fight. You were magnificent, darling." A small part of me was surprised she would bring up an underground illegal fight night, but looking around I realized that half the people here had been at that fight. It occurred to me that some of the looks Reva was getting might have actually been from admirers. Reva was used to praise for her fighting. She didn't show any false humility. She knew she was good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was a close one. You made it look easy, my dear. Are you having a good time? She didn't even wait for an answer. Oh, you don't even have anything to drink. She snapped her fingers and a waiter materialized with a tray of drinks. She picked two of them up at random, handing them off to us one at a time. Please make yourself at home. I'm sorry I can't stay to talk. I have to mingle, but I'll find you soon to discuss business. Again, she didn't wait for a response, catching the eye of a politician and moving off back into the crowd. Well, you heard her. Make yourselves at home, Reva said over the rim of her cocktail. If I did that, we'd be kicked out, I chuckled. We stood for a moment, frozen in indecision, not knowing where to move to, who to talk to. Damn it, we didn't know anyone in this room, and I'm not good at making new friends. I couldn't decide what was worse, not having anyone to talk to, or having to talk to someone who had more dollars than brain cells. I had to hand it to these rich types though, at least they had good taste in music. The band was playing a classic, Lone Digger by Caravan Palace, one of my favourites from the early 2000s. To be fair, I wouldn't have ever heard it if Thea wasn't such a fan of old school music. While I was letting my thoughts drift to the good tunes, Reva was becoming more and more comfortable with herself in her outfit and image. Sierra's compliments had given her a boost that she desperately needed. I, on the other hand, felt like a monkey in a suit. At least Reva had made the effort. Her hair, some makeup, the dress. I'd pulled my hair back into a ponytail, my white forelock finding its way free as always. I'd shaved, of course. I wasn't a Neanderthal. But even in this suit, which probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, I felt like I was faking it, and even worse, everyone could tell. Reva's thoughts leaked over to me as my hand rested on her waist, the physical contact helping our thoughts go both ways. They're all faking it. I doubt that, I thought back, eyeing one overweight politician sitting with scantily clad elf girls, one on each arm. Trust me, I scoffed. She spoke aloud now, but low. If they aren't faking the money, they're faking the smile. If it's not the smile, it's sincerity. Everyone here is faking something. They're all waiting to be caught out. Working hard at covering up whatever it is. Since when are you so familiar with high society? She shrugged, lifting her drink to her lips. It's all the same, high society, low society, no society. No one is truly honest with each other. Everyone's got secrets. We all want to hide something. I raised an eyebrow as I side-eyed her. Even you? My mind went back to that name that Kumo had called her at the base. Bloodhorn. Her face went blank, picking up the thought. Some things are better left in the past. That irked me. Not that she had secrets, but that she didn't feel she could tell me. At least you have the choice to keep them to yourself. That was a cheap shot. I felt dirty as soon as I said it. If anyone was to blame for our condition, it was me. She took half a step back from me, her eyes going cold in a second. I'm sorry, that was unfair. I could see her turning over the idea, deciding whether to make an issue of it in front of everyone here. I hoped she could feel my sincerity through our link. She narrowed her eyes and stepped back in beside me, albeit turning slightly to look away. We've been through this. I nodded, taking a long drink from the blue cocktail in my hand. I know. She let out a sigh and then grabbed my hand and replaced it on her waist, resuming the striking image of us as a couple and our two-way link. It's not that I don't want to tell you, her voice said inside my mind. It's just that there are things even I haven't come to terms with yet. I understood that, and to be fair, she had done her best to pretend, to keep up the pretense of privacy for me when it was necessary. I dropped the matter. Now wasn't the time anyway. We returned to people watching. As we stood, sipping our drinks and having a private conversation in our heads, the last person I expected awkwardly forced their way through the crowd towards me. Chief Inspector Anthony Hammond looked like a fish out of water. He was dressed smartly, his dress uniform crisp and clean, his moustache trimmed neatly, his jaw metallic polished. He actually cut quite a striking figure in the crowd, I had to admit. Unfortunately, he also radiated displeasure. He squared his shoulders as he came to a halt in front of us. Despite our professional rivalry, I knew that we shared one thing tonight. We had both been strong-armed into turning up. I decided not to choose violence, just for one night. Good, I think you've antagonized enough authority figures this week, Reva confirmed over our link. Chief Inspector, nice to see you turning out as the face of the city's police. I let just a little attitude slide in. He bristled slightly, but my casual tone and genuine smile had clearly taken the wind out of his sails. I'm surprised you turned up, Whitlock. Not my idea, trust me, I indicated to him in his clean uniform. I'm assuming you got the hard word from above. He nodded and reached out to grab a waiter by the shoulder. Bring me something with a kick in it, kid. The waiter scurried off. Aren't you technically on duty? Reva asked. Face of the force and all that? He eyed her, but replied politely enough. I can be here, or I can be sober. I can't be both. The waiter returned with a short glass of amber liquid. I could smell spices. He took a swig. It'll do. Hammond took a moment to enjoy his drink, then motioned to Reva with his glass. You going to introduce me, Whitlock? I mentally shook myself. Hammond was trying to be social. Of course. Apologies. Hammond, this is my partner, Reva. Harlock. I paused only slightly on the word partner. Reva, this is Chief Inspector Anthony Hammond. He looked from her to me, clearly trying to establish the nature of our relationship, his eye settling on my arm around her waist and her hand on the small of my back. I saw a glint in his eye, like he was amused by something. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Harlock. He turned back to me, speaking awkwardly. I didn't know you that you had. He trailed off, not knowing how to articulate what it was that he was insinuating. I was told that it was just you and your sister. I do have a life outside of work, I said, though it was pretty much a lie. Isn't there a Mrs. Hammond? I made a show of looking around him for such a person. He shifted uncomfortably. Yes, but she's been staying with her sister in Albany for the last 4 months. The last few words were almost a whisper over the top of his glass. I could practically feel the temperature drop. He let out a weary sigh. Ugh, she says I work too much. This was a new side of Hammond I'd never seen before. The few times we had met, it was in a professional circumstance and we'd always butted heads. I didn't like his inability to adapt to situations, his rigid adherence to the rules, and his stupid mustache. I couldn't think what his problem with me was. I was a fucking delight. But the conversational tone he had adopted told me that he was willing to make peace for one night at least. Hammond trying to be civil, this would take some getting used to. I don't think we've ever had a conversation in which you weren't telling me to fuck off, I said, immediately pushing the boundaries of our newly forged friendship. I said it to try and change the topic and lighten the mood. It came out sharper than I'd intended. I'd rather talk to you than any of these pompous... He cut himself off, remembering his surroundings. Any port in a storm, he muttered. I'm flattered. Look, he continued begrudgingly, I might not like hunters, and I think you're an overconfident, impulsive showboater, with little regard for me, my officers, or any respect for authority. You're chaotic, impulsive. Please, enough with the compliments, I said, cutting him off, sarcasm as thick as honey. He grimaced at the interruption but continued. But, at least you're a straight shooter. Not full of bullshit. He made a gesture to our surroundings. Not entirely, Reva offered with a smile. Hammond knocked back the rest of his drink, flagging down another waiter for more of the same. Interesting though, isn't it? He said, his voice less gruff. All these enemies pretending to be all buddy-buddy just for good PR. What do you mean? I was following his gaze as he looked from group to group that had congealed on the floor around certain individuals. He took his second drink from a silver tray and motioned to each group in turn. None of this lot actually like each other, though you wouldn't know it from looking.
I thought they'd all be best pals with their private jets and penthouses,
Reaver said. He shook his head. We've got files on all of them, as thick as a troll's head and twice as ugly. He looked me in the eye. Get your sister to run a search. He paused to sip his drink, slower this time, actually savouring it now. I looked over his shoulder as the elevator opened and some of the members of the security detail from the ground floor entered. They're all in competition with each other, Hammond continued, not noticing my distractedness. Politically, corporately, shit, some even have legacy feuds going back hundreds of years. Half the room wants the other half dead. They'd sell each other out at the drop of a hat if they weren't all so good at covering their own asses. And Sierra? She's the first on the list for a lot of them. And yet they all turned up, I asked skeptically. He rolled his eyes. Please, you can't be that dim. It's all about PR. There's those two letters again. It's a fact. Everyone complains because the corps have the city by the balls. But no one complains too loud, because they know how to spin their image and keep the public just enough on their side not to rise up and topple the towers. Until now, Reaver put in. He fixed her with a stare, but no one could give a good stare like my girl. She matched him, and he eventually looked away. You think that this terrorist is going after the fat cats?
Most of the buildings targeted were the centers of business empires,
Reaver offered, leading off of the thoughts that I'd had in the limo on the way over. He made a face like he was chewing a rock. It had occurred to us too. It's not surprising, though. What is surprising is the lack of any demands or even threats. I don't suppose you have any theories? He asked with no real hope in his voice. One or two, but nothing concrete, I said vaguely. He grunted, like it was as much as he'd expected. There was an awkward silence. It dragged out longer than I could handle, and I cracked. Part of me couldn't take the silence, and the other part of me couldn't handle him thinking I was incompetent. I sighed. I can't tell you much, but I have reason to believe that there will be demands eventually. But more importantly, this guy has enough high explosives to do what he did all over again. The report had come through from the base that afternoon. I'd been right. Their experts had reviewed the footage and inspected the sites. What had happened hadn't accounted for the full amount stolen. His face sunk into a grim expression, one I was more familiar with. Look, I know we haven't gotten along in the past, to put it mildly, but it is in the best interest of the city that we share information at this point. This isn't some rogue target. This is serious, catastrophic shit. That's all I've got, honestly. There was no need to tell him about the theory from the witches and the book. He'd probably lose any confidence he had in me that I'd just built up. Best case, he'd call me a conspiracy nut. Worst case, he'd believe me and spread the news through the departments and the public. Then it would get out and back to whoever was behind this. How do you know he's got more up his sleeves? I can't divulge my sources on that. Anger and frustration wrote themselves large across his face, and I held up a hand placatingly. No, really, that's not me being difficult. It's actually not my information to give out. My hands are tied, at a level above me. Well, sideways, more accurately. Well, that's something at least. I'll increase surveillance on buildings of a similar MO to those already hit. Look, if I come across anything else, I promise I'll pass it on. He thanked me, begrudgingly, and we continued our awkward antisocial group of three while the party milled around us. A few of the other guests gave Hammond a polite greeting, some more smug than others, and I figured that he had had dealings with them at some point. No one wanted to approach us for conversation, though. I figured having people like myself and the Chief Inspector might have some of them uncomfortable. Some might just think we were beneath them. Not surprising, really. Many of these people were outspoken racist elites. It was a side to Sierra that I'd heard rumoured of. People said she was all for the reascendance of elven power. But I was a half-blood, and she hadn't shown any discomfort in my presence. Maybe she was just good at hiding it. People could tell when you were a half-elf, not human enough to be human, not vital and elegant enough to be an elf. We were watered-down wine. Right on cue and proving my point, Sierra re-emerged from the throng laughing softly at a joke and trailing sycophants.
"This is the man you want to talk to," I caught her saying as she turned that smile on me. "Ulf, we were just discussing the scant evidence as to the identity of the terrorist. Oh, hello, Chief Inspector."
The last comment was way too casual. It sounded rehearsed.
"I hope you're all getting along. I don't have to call security, do I?"
She laughed at her own joke. The gaggle of guests that trailed in her wake and coalesced into a semicircle around us, giggling along with her. Flutes of champagne held daintily, clothes worth a mint, and faces you just wanted to punch. Some people are born rich, some inherit riches. A scant few work hard to achieve it. These dickheads scammed, conned, and bribed or threatened their way to riches. A full clip and a fully automatic submachine gun, and I could redistribute some serious wealth. Reva's face looked shocked as she heard my thoughts.
"Where did that come from?"
I wasn't sure. Maybe it was the booze. I didn't drink often. "You must be the gallant hunter," one of the hangers-on chortled to themselves. He was mostly plated in chrome, head to toe, with gold hair. Not the color of gold, gold strands woven with another alloy, a fraction of a millimeter thin each strand. I resisted the urge to break his nose. Instead, and mustering all the false good humor I had, I smiled. "Well, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, providing I know the answers." "It's funny, that's what we usually say to you people," the twit chortled. Another elf spoke up.
"We want to know where you have started looking for this miscreant."
This one was just as ridiculous with his modifications. His bald head redressed in polished gold with optic upgrades to make his eyes glow a bright turquoise. I didn't even get to draw breath before another pompous she-elf spoke in a tone of voice so stereotypical I'd only ever heard it in satire comedy.
"Whoever they are, they're clearly the spawn of the working class," she said. "Oh, that is a awful generalization," Sierra put in. "Really? I remember a conversation with you a few years ago. You said the city needed a good cleansing."
I caught a flicker of something across Sierra's face at that statement. Fear or anger?
"Thankfully, my eyes have been opened since then."
"You've been tamed, my dear," a young woman at the back said with a chuckle.
"I don't think that the hard-working and honest people of this city would be at all so aggravated to take it out on their own, just to get back at a few business owners."
I shared a look with Hammond. He rolled his eyes. "I'm just saying, it wouldn't surprise me," the original she-elf replied, not wanting to have such poor form as to offend her host completely, but still not budging in her opinion.
"You hear stories, don't you, about disgruntled workers taking radical action? Delusional individuals."
"I lost a critical center of operation to this delusional individual,"
one of the few humans in the group said. His overweight bulk supported by 6 mechanical legs that made him look like some sort of giant crab. Not to mention all the people inside of it, I offered the reminder, not being able to stop myself. I saw Reva's eyes widen slightly, warning me to play nice.
"But they clearly weren't the target,"
he said, dismissing my comment with a wave of his hand, as though that made it completely acceptable collateral damage. "I'm sure their families will find that comforting." This time it was Hammond who spoke up, and I was grateful for the backup.
"I'm sorry, Chief Inspector, but all of you people must see the big picture," the gold-domed elf replied. "Someone is clearly out to put a dent in our businesses."
That begs the question, which one of you wasn't targeted? I dropped the question and it sunk like a lead balloon. The group held an awkward silence for a moment, considering what I'd just put forward.
"Way to put the cat among the pigeons," Reva thought in my direction. "I hope you're happy."
"I am, rather," I silently replied.
"I think we've all suffered some degree," said Goldilocks. "Except that asshole Mason Baelish."
"Oh, and Sierra, of course."
The statement was offered in a jovial tone. It didn't stay that way. Both Hammond and I raised eyebrows and turned our gaze on her, along with the rest of the circle.
"I don't own any buildings that match the attacker's M.O., she explained calmly. Apart from my apartments here, all the offices I run, I rent my spaces from you lot. She motioned to the rest of the circle. All my major family holdings are still in Europe. The atmosphere relaxed, general muttering along the lines of, well, of course, and oh yes, obviously. I smiled. Who was looking nervous? I didn't get a chance to overanalyze my fellow partygoers. I didn't get a chance to finish my drink. The sound of rapid fire cut through the music and the chatter, screams and cries of panic. All eyes turned to the stage, the source of the gunfire. Chunks of glass fell from the ceiling over one of the security officers. His mechanical arm parted at the elbow to make way for a fully automatic gun augmentation. His eyes held the telltale glaze, the look of someone who is being controlled by a cipher. More of the security team made their presence known as they unleashed rounds into the walls, 10 of them in total that I could see. They encircled the party. Apparently, they were exempt from any anti-violence programs, probably because they were the security. Sierra had not known, and in my arrogance it hadn't occurred to me that of course the stranger could use them to his advantage. All the rich and powerful dropped low or hid behind their own personal security detail. More panic, more chaos rose to a crescendo as someone foolishly tried to make a run for the elevator and got gunned down. That is what awaits anyone who tries to leave. His voice, assisted by the tech in his helmet, boomed over the crowd. There he was, strutting onto the stage, hands in his pockets, casually advancing on the crowd. This time he had discarded his usual attire for a form-fitting suit, black and red, a long coat of a similar fashion over the top, his helmet the same old unit he had always used. One of the bodyguards sprung to his feet, bringing an old-fashioned revolver to bear on the stranger. He had circumnavigated the restrictions on any weapons by bringing something so old no one would have been looking for it. My kind of man. Await this! The stranger's hand shot out of his pocket lightning fast, his wrist already encircled with the magical green glyphs that were a manifestation of his magic. The bodyguard froze, his finger hovering over the trigger. It was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. The stranger tilted his head. The bodyguard, fear in his eyes, slowly began to turn the gun on himself. The barrel curving through the air to end up inside his mouth. The bullet turned the back of his head to red mist. His lifeless body tumbled to the floor. So, does anyone else have any other pointless attempts at heroism? Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. New episodes uploaded every second Saturday. Script and narration by JJ Brandis. Music was provided by Cale McLeish. Copyright JJ Brandis 2025.